So the most likely outcome at this point is basically financial singularity, where Bitcoin is the standard for the globe.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's likely now. I think that the time for Bitcoin to fail has basically passed. That window of opportunity is gone. There was a time when governments, for example, could crush Bitcoin if they wanted to, like the United States government or others potentially could have crushed it at the outset. And they did try to a certain extent in terms of crushing, for example, the Silk Road, seizing Bitcoin, China shutting down Bitcoin mining. They did make some attempts to constrain Bitcoin, but I think we've moved past that. The Overton window has moved, and I think that now Bitcoin has reached this point of it's gained this momentum that is irresistible, so that even the US government itself cannot resist this kind of onward march of Bitcoin.
It's that beautiful game theory, because the moment it was small enough to kill it, it was not attractive enough to actually allocate the resources to actually go ahead and kill it. So let's say 2011, if the US actually was like, hey, we don't like that, let's kill that, they could have done it because it was not that big at that moment. I think so. Maybe not. It's always hard to say like what happens if and stuff like that. But now, because it's so attractive, they cannot resist it, and they have to kind of adopt it, because they know if they don't adopt it, someone else will. And this is the whole game theory, where either you come on board or you just get left behind at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And I think even now, I don't think the US government anyway, has ever fully understood what Bitcoin is and what it represents. And I think even now, they don't fully understand it. Certainly, I don't think President Trump understands it. He is pro-Bitcoin, which is great. He became pro-Bitcoin, I think, because of the fact that he realized that there's this group of people who could potentially help him to become president. So if he caters to this group of people, libertarians, Bitcoiners, etc., and cryptocurrency enthusiasts as well, if he caters to them, then they can help him to become president. And he surrounded himself with people who are themselves Bitcoiners, such as the new crypto AIs are. You've got David Sachs, you have Besant, the Treasury Secretary, you have Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary. He's actually, I believe he's the head of, or CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, which is that company that now is working with, was it SoftBank, and what was the other one? I forgot the other one now. But there's three companies that are working together to establish this 21 Capital.
Tether, right?
Oh yeah, Tether. Yeah, Tether, which is one of the major Bitcoin holders, actually. Tether holds a huge amount of Bitcoin. But yeah, Tether, SoftBank, and Cantor Fitzgerald. And the guy behind Cantor Fitzgerald is Howard Lutnick, who is the Commerce Secretary in Trump's cabinet. He's also a billionaire. He personally holds a huge amount of Bitcoin himself. He's constantly acquiring it. And he's also, I think it's with Besant, he's also the person who's responsible for what goes into the U.S. Sovereign Wealth Fund, which they've just created. So that U.S. Sovereign Wealth Fund itself could potentially acquire Bitcoin, or it could acquire even, shares in Strategy, MSTR. It could acquire shares in the 21 Capital, which is going to be indirectly Bitcoin, essentially. Well, it's going to be acquiring Bitcoin in competition with Michael Saylor's company. So it's just interesting that Trump has surrounded himself with these Bitcoiners, and even members of his family now, like Eric Trump, probably Donald Trump Jr. as well, I imagine. But Eric Trump especially is interested in Bitcoin mining, and he thinks Bitcoin's inevitably going to go to $1 million, and so he's very much pro Bitcoin, especially due to the fact that his family has been debanked and essentially financially persecuted at the same time as well. So, but even them, I think they understand Bitcoin to a certain degree. Do they know that a Bitcoin standard would eventually replace the dollar as we know it? I'm not sure. I think they see it as this apex store of value, and they realize why the US should acquire it, because the US wants to increase its wealth, it wants to pay off the national debt, it wants to monetize its assets. And why should the US be selling and getting rid of the Bitcoin that it already holds? But yeah, I mean, Besant and Sachs also want to acquire more Bitcoin for the Bitcoin strategic reserve as well, in a tax neutral way, which could be anything from like selling gold or selling other assets to issuing special bit bonds or Bitcoin bonds of some kind or another. But yeah, I think they don't quite see necessarily the end. I could be wrong. Maybe Howard Lutnick and these others actually do see the final vision of Bitcoin. But I'm not 100% certain that they do realize that the US dollar as we know it could cease to exist. Because on a Bitcoin standard, you could still have something called the US dollar, but it wouldn't be what it is now. It wouldn't be the US dollar that we know, which is the purely fiat currency. If it becomes backed by Bitcoin 100%, then it's essentially you're spending Bitcoin. You're just spending Bitcoin that you don't hold yourself. So if Bitcoin is denominated as $100 million per Bitcoin, then one Bitcoin is one Satoshi. So if you spend $1 on something, you are by default spending one Satoshi because they're backed 1-to-1. You're just not spending it on the Lightning Network or on the base chain. So it's kind of a way of scaling Bitcoin essentially. But in that sense, the US loses its power to print money because you can't print more than it holds in Bitcoin. So it needs to hold as much Bitcoin as it can in order to, issue dollars that are backed by that Bitcoin.
That's super interesting. Just a quick question on the 21 Capital, which will be, I think, led by Jack Mullers with the three companies together that you mentioned. Is that the first real competition to strategy?
I think it is, and I think it's the thing that's interesting about it is it's not a company that was doing something else that is now adopting a Bitcoin standard. That's been the example up to this point. Any company like MicroStrategy, or Strategy as it's now called, is a software company. It relies on business intelligence. It produces software. Now it's become a Bitcoin treasury company, but that was to save the company. And because Michael Saylor realized this will save my company, and it will also allow me to acquire this most valuable asset. But this now, I think, is the first real implementation of let's create a purpose-built Bitcoin treasury company. So it is competition in the sense that it's going to try and do what Strategy is already doing, and perhaps in some ways improve upon it, like, for example, releasing proof of reserves and other. Maybe they'll use different methods of raising money that I'm not aware of. But in terms of actually, are they on the same level as Strategy? Then I don't think necessarily they are, because what I mean by that is, can they significantly acquire Bitcoin to the level of Strategy? I don't think so, because there's a first mover advantage. There's no way really for anyone to catch up, because if you do catch up, that means you're acquiring hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin, and the supply is so limited that if you're doing that, you will significantly affect the price. If you significantly affect the price, you basically further push strategies' lead ahead of you. So I think there is competition in terms of nation states, because there are nation states which could potentially acquire more Bitcoin than strategy, like the United States, like China, and a handful of others, possibly, like some of the Gulf states, Arab Gulf states, a few other wealthy Asian nations. In Europe, I mean, there's a potential, but I think European governments at the moment are so myopic and so drunk on the fiat standard, and the idea of centralized control, centralized governance, that they are unlikely to ever acquire as much as the United States, or as much as strategy, simply because they don't have the will and the vision. But the United States can. China could potentially realize this long before the EU or the UK. The UK as well is pretty myopic in terms of Bitcoin. But luckily, they currently have, in theory, 61,000, I think it is, Bitcoin. So they've already got a certain amount by accident, essentially, or through taking it from criminals. So as long as they don't make the mistake that Germany made of selling all their Bitcoin, then they should be okay. The UK should be okay, but still, it's not going to catch up with strategy. I just think there's not enough Bitcoin in the world, essentially. If the US really got serious about it, they could acquire maybe 5 million Bitcoin if they wanted to, if they really get it. But if they're doing that, then China will want to compete. If China's also trying to get 5 million Bitcoin, there's only 21 million Bitcoin that can exist. And there's around, let's say 195 or maybe up to 200 countries in the world. So if you have roughly 200 countries, you have 21 million Bitcoin. You have companies that want to acquire Bitcoin. And also high net worth individuals, hedge funds, banks, you name it. How does everybody get enough Bitcoin? How does everyone get as much Bitcoin as they want? There's a limit to what you can acquire in Bitcoin, although Bitcoin itself can absorb any amount of wealth. So it could absorb all the wealth that's in existence in the world, and you could absorb all of that into 21 million Bitcoin. But not everyone can get as much Bitcoin as they want. So it's in that sense, it's a zero-sum game. Even though wealth itself is not a zero-sum game, wealth can infinitely be created. There's no fixed pie of wealth in the world, but there is a fixed pie of an absolutely scarce currency. So Bitcoin is a fixed pie. So it is a zero-sum game. If someone gets more Bitcoin, someone else has less Bitcoin that they can get. So in that sense, yeah, as I said, I don't think that 21 Capital can compete to get as much Bitcoin as strategy. But I do think governments can compete with strategy if they're wealthy, powerful governments, not maybe the bottom 150 countries in the world, but maybe the top 20, 30, maybe up to 50 countries could potentially compete with strategy. But they have to be there first. They have to do it before the other countries, or they will lose, essentially.
Yeah, and they have to. It's a really tricky game because you have to be quick, but also not so aggressive that people notice it too much. So you're. I mean, Donald Trump honestly is in one heck of a position because other world leaders might are like, oh, he's just crazy, and maybe he's selling all of the Bitcoin like in 1 year later and stuff like that. So if someone is currently in a great position to take the pole position in a Bitcoin world, it's the US. They have a really great position. Imagine the fear of missing out for Bitcoin if Joe Biden did the same thing. It would be a completely different thing. It's the same thing for me with, let's say, Tesla already bought Bitcoin. Like, that's an actual thing. We don't have to say that because Tesla actually bought already, I think now they have like 10,000 Bitcoin. This is not taken as serious as Apple would buy Bitcoin with the same percentage amount from the balance sheet and stuff like that. Because Apple is just looking at is taken in a different light. And when you look from European perspective and other things, I don't know if it would be fun to see how people would react if someone where you don't expect something like that, like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, like the Democrat Party, would do the same thing and say, oh, we have a strategic Bitcoin reserve and maybe we buy some. It is completely outlandish. I think it wouldn't have been possible. But that probably would trigger it faster. With all that, I just want to say, I think Trump is in a great position buying a lot of Bitcoin and other nation states being confused what he actually wants to do with that. Because he's known as an unpredictable guy. I mean, he wrote the art of the deal, and this is literally a point that he writes, like, never be predictable for your opponent. So that is a unique position to be in. I don't know if that was clear what I tried to communicate, but he's in a really unique position. The US is in a really unique position to get a huge head start in the next 4 years for Bitcoin world. Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.